They say they're standing up for their principles by sitting down. Democrats, they wrapped up a 25-hour sit-in today, pushing for a gun control vote. But so far, nothing has happened on that front. Determined Democrats staging an unprecedented sit-in on Capitol Hill.
Give us a vote. Let us vote.
Congressman John Lewis, the civil rights icon, leading the protest on the House floor starting shortly before noon on Wednesday. And the standoff continued into today, pushing for a vote on gun control just days after the Senate voted down similar measures, despite mounting pressures following the Orlando shooting rampage.
All we're asking is two very minor things: no fly, no buy. Right. No fly, no buy, and the background checks loopholes.
Republican leaders at one point ordered the House into recess, and they turned off the cameras, citing a breach of the rules. But the protesting lawmakers continued broadcasting using their cell phones and social media.
House will be in order.
And in a move to try to end the sit-in, the Speaker of the House announced overnight the Republicans will start their already scheduled recess earlier, denying Democrats any chance of a vote on guns, at least for now.
We have other bridges to cross, and when we come back in July, we'll start all over again. But the American people, they want us to act, they want us to do something.
For one, House Speaker Paul Ryan not impressed.
This is nothing more than a publicity stunt. That's point number one. Point number two is this bill was already defeated in the United States Senate. Number three, we're not going to take away a citizen's due process rights. We're not going to take away a citizen's constitutional rights without due process. That was already defeated in the Senate, and this is not a way to try and bring up legislation.
Let me get reaction. I'll start with the two men who were there. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I was the point person on the Republican side when we passed the assault weapon ban. Henry Hyde was the closer. When we passed it, it passed by one vote, and 19 Democrats lost in the next election who voted for the assault weapon ban. So the irony here is there are some Democrats who want to vote, and there are some Democrats who don't want to vote. Some Republicans want to vote, some don't. Give them a vote. Give them a vote. You know, and I remember when I was in the minority before '94, all we asked as Republicans was, just give us a vote. So there's no courage to just stand up and vote your conscience and then live with the consequences. It's a no-brainer. And I think Republicans are going to regret that they're not giving a vote. If they did have a vote, there would be some Democrats, if they voted for it, who would lose the next election.
You know, and we'll flash up some poll numbers as we talk here in terms of what the public feels. Again, we're talking about two things. We're not even talking about assault weapons ban, which would be more contentious in today's day and age. We're talking about basic background checks, or moreover, to closing loopholes, gun shows, etc.
Yeah.
And then a ban for people on the terror watch list. Listen, Paul Ryan, whether you agree or not, nobody disagrees. He's a sharp guy with, I think, good political instincts. This doesn't feel or sound right in that, hey, the senator voted, so we shouldn't have to have an opinion on it. Fighting for the rights for guys on a terror watch list to be able to buy a gun, it doesn't make any, it's crazy. Now, I get the whole slippery slope and everything else, and I know I guess I'm preaching to the choir here, but were you watching and was there a certain point where you said, you know what, sounds like they're grandstanding a little bit here. The public may be on their side with the polls, but are they overplaying it? I noticed Nancy Pelosi wasn't leading the charge. It was some of the more the rank and file members.
Well, it was John Lewis who was.
Well, fair enough.
Well, you know, sometimes you have to raise your voice when injustice is going on.
So would you have stood with him
Absolutely.
if you were there? Yeah.
Absolutely. To, as just as Chris said, to get a vote. This is 85% of the American people. 85% want this. Want people who are on the terror watch list not to be able to buy a gun. Now, the provision that just Susan Collins presented in the Senate provides a due process route for those who feel they're wrongfully put on the terror watch list. There's an appeals process, but the House Republicans won't allow it, and the House Senate won't give them 60 votes because the Republicans are afraid of the NRA. That's the bold-faced truth. 85% of the American people want it. And by the way, most of the people on the terror watch list are not American citizens.
But Paul Ryan was right in one regard. This was a publicity stunt by the House Democrats. Clearly it was. Even if they got the vote, they weren't going to pass the vote. He's also right that the Senate had already rejected this, so it wasn't like progress was going to be made in terms of passing the bill.
Let me disagree with Andrew and take exception with my friend Paul Ryan. A publicity stunt, it's calling attention to an injustice perpetrated by those in control of the House, the Republicans, and those in control of the Senate, the Republicans, who will not provide a compromise on this terror watch list that 85% of the American people want.
Fair enough, but you said calls attention to. That's the definition of a publicity stunt.
It is also it is also achieving justice. You cannot get people's attention sometimes unless you raise
What I don't like is stunt. Stunt implies something that's just for the purpose of just doing it. No, this was the purpose of getting a vote. But I disagree. The significance of the 85%. It's 85. It's 100% in some, 90% in some districts, but in some key districts, it is definitely not a popular vote. And those folks are Democrats and
But
Republicans.
here's what if I could ask. But here's what I never got. You can give political cover, as you had to figure out here, where a lot of Republicans couldn't vote for the assault weapons ban, which I'm sure privately they said they supported because they would have had trouble with the primary the next go around for election, let alone in the general. But you figured it out. Didn't the math say there's a way to do this?
Wait a second. First off, if you are pro-life, you don't compromise at all. And as soon as you compromise, then you're taken off the support of the pro-life. A little teeny compromise, the NRA goes after you. I remember when the NRA went after me, they never even said they were the NRA. They just talked about all these other issues, but it was totally an NRA.
So I'm sorry, you don't believe it's overstated the power, which for me, if you have a great rating with the NRA, let's say you get a A-, B+ rating, let alone, and you say, on this one, guys, to my constituents, I don't want terrorists to be able to buy a gun.
They will give you an F on that one vote.
And will they really lose as a consequence of that in certain districts?
In certain districts, they will.
But here's the more fundamental point for America. We've had bad policies in this country. Slavery. We eventually, after 200 years, got rid of slavery. We didn't let women vote. We eventually changed that. There was no same-sex marriage. We eventually changed that.
Right.
Big monumental changes. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid were opposed by one party, the Republican Party.
Wait, don't get carried away.
We eventually got it passed anyway. It's simply a matter of what the American people demand. Now, whether some House members or senators will lose their seats because a lobbying group won't like their vote.
Here's where I disagree with you.
Go ahead.
This is the first issue I remember where it hasn't gone along the typical scale where you'll see this eventually, the polls mitigate and then finally get there. On this one, and Chris, you can speak to it, you actually led the charge where there was more ambitious gun control in an issue, assault weapons, for example. They're not even trying to pass that today. That got changed. That sunsetted. They couldn't get it through again. And now today, they obviously feel politically it's a lot less risky to be for the status quo than against it.
Okay, they is a term. There are leaders who are they, and then there are rank and file. Some leaders feel they will win in certain districts if they have a vote. Some leaders think they will win if they ask for a vote but don't have it. And so it's only a stunt if they really don't want to have a vote. But the value of having a vote is you educate people. And so just to say, well, it won't pass, so why do it? No, you keep at it, you educate, you explain, you have meaningful dialogue.
I just want to ask while we still have time, because we have a lot of congressional experience at the table here. Was this sit-in a bad precedent? Is this bad for the institution in the long run? Because, you know, roles reverse, and if Republicans are the minority, couldn't they take to the floor and block stuff?
Andrew, that is a great question, and that thought occurred to me as well. I thought Speaker, and the answer is yes, there was a potential for it to get out of control. But I'll give Speaker Ryan credit. He handled it brilliantly by, he didn't shut off the lights, he didn't shut off the air conditioning, And he found a way to let the Democrats make their case on the House floor.
showed up the TV.
After he scooted out of town.
But he knew that social media, or should have known, that social media would have covered that for them, and that's what happened. Everybody saw what happened after he turned off C-SPAN. And then he allowed the Democrats to have their 24 hours and then said, okay, now we adjourn until after the 4th of July. So I think
it's not going away, though.
Speaker,
That's the problem.
but Speaker Ryan, I think, as an institutional person, someone who's devoted to the institution, which I believe he is, handled it brilliantly. I'm hopeful, though, that he will allow a vote on the gun control measures of if you're on the terror list, you can't get a gun, and if you, with a right to appeal, and if the gun show loophole should be closed, and they should have background checks too.
I got to hit a break here, and it's a subject both of you I know are looking on with interest, and that is potentially the disunion in the European Union. We're looking at live pictures here as they're tabulating votes here. If the British leave the EU, how could this reverberate, as they say, across the pond to the U.S. and beyond?